Monika Rühl, welcome to the Executive Talk. You've been director of Economiesuisse for 5 years now, and I've looked back a little bit about what you had to face in all these 5 years, and it was never really calm, because when you started, we had the vote about immigration, then we had, of course, the Euro-Swiss franc crisis, if you want. We have an ongoing discussion about the relationship between Switzerland and the European Union. It has never been calm, has it? I mean, since you started, you've been in a kind of a constant explaining and crisis mode almost.
Yeah, well, that's pretty true, actually. And I was thinking about what kind of a saying could fit best to describe this 5 years period, but also the very moment we are living in. And there is a saying which some say it comes from China, others say it comes from elsewhere. It says, may you live in interesting times. Mm-hmm. And I think this is really, it describes it very accurately, and it makes our work very interesting, it makes our work very challenging, and it gives me the power and also the passion to work for Switzerland as a very good and attractive business location.
When you say it has been a challenging 5 years, it certainly hasn't been boring, I guess, for you working in that position. But if you compare the situation now to when you started with all these different issues and crises that we had, would you say Switzerland at the moment, or the state of the Swiss businesses, the state of the Swiss economy at the moment, is better than 5 years ago, or is it worse? Is it more difficult?
Well, I think it's still pretty good. I think we have the huge chance of having a strong economy, a highly diversified economy. We've got a number of global players that are active worldwide. We've got a strong SME community in Switzerland, with many of them are export-oriented, many of them are world leaders as well. So we have an extremely good basis. But we need to make sure that we can, use this basis also in the future. It means that we have to look at reforms. We have now a yes from the Swiss people when it comes to a tax reform that was badly needed. But we need to look at other reforms, such as the pension reform. It's over more than 20 years that we did not manage to agree on a pension reform in Switzerland. And this, with an aging society, it's kind of incredible. And as you pointed out, we need really to have a strong relationship with the European Union, which is our neighbors and our most important trading partners.
That's probably your biggest fight at the moment, right? That you are heavily invested in fighting for that famous framework agreement that is on the table and yet is not being decided on. Is that your biggest worry at the moment, that Switzerland is lacking there and is waiting too long, and that we're getting lost in that discussion?
Well, I think there are two worries at this very moment. The one is really this institutional framework agreement. I'm a trained diplomat. I was active in trade policies, in trade diplomacy. I've read this agreement, the draft agreement, a number of times, and I've really come to the conclusion this is a good agreement for Switzerland. It has been well negotiated. And of course, as in every negotiations, Switzerland had to go for compromise. We have to find consensus. Now, the issue is that the Swiss government apparently is not willing to sign the agreement and to put it for ratification. And so we have been strongly advocating for the Swiss government to do exactly that. There are a number of issues that need to be clarified. That is quite obvious. But we expect really the Swiss government to do that. Now, it's over the summer. Nothing apparently has happened, and so we are kind of worried. And
are you disappointed with the Swiss government?
We are disappointed indeed, because I think there is a lack of political courage and a lack of political will also with the government. And when you look at what happens with the political parties in Switzerland, everybody's pointing out, well, we will have federal elections in October, so we can't possibly decide now on this agreement.
Which is true in a way, because it is a political question as well, and if you have an election, it's probably everybody's waiting, right?
Yeah, but the fact is we're not alone. We have a partner with whom we do find, common grounds. And this partner is in a transition period. The EU has now, a new president of the EU Commission has been appointed. Mrs. von der Leyen will be forming a new team. But we do not know how this team will look like. We do not know what the priorities of this team will be. The only thing we know is this team of the EU will have to face Brexit. And with Boris Johnson now being elected Prime Minister of the UK, we are heading with some probability towards a hard Brexit. And a hard Brexit brings uncertainty for the relationship between Britain and the EU, but it brings also uncertainty for Switzerland. Switzerland having strong relations with both the UK and the EU, and a hard Brexit brings certainty also to the world economy. So I think, to point out that with federal elections ahead of us, Swiss politicians cannot decide now. I think this is really sort of an excuse and not more.
Do you often feel that you're almost you're the economy, or you speak for the economy? Of course, there's the political agenda as well, the political world as well. Do you feel sometimes that you're almost like a hostage to the politicians? That in cases or in questions like these, that you have to wait until the federal government or the parliament is doing something?
Well, our job is basically to convince, to inform, first to start with, to inform politicians, the Swiss political system, about the concerns and the needs of the Swiss companies. And then eventually to convince them to move. And of course we need to take into account their concerns, their restrictions, that's pretty sure. In this very case, I think I have less understanding than maybe for other questions. So we really hope that there will be a move now from the Federal Council, because if the Federal Council does not move, nothing will happen. If the Federal Council, before the end of October, which leaves a short period of time between the federal elections and the end of the very month, if the Federal Council would decide to sign the agreement, then we will have the normal procedure that enters into place. The Parliament will debate on the agreement, and for sure there will be a popular vote. And it will take 1 year, 1.5 years, eventually 2 years until this popular vote takes place. There will be plenty of time for discussions, but we need to have now the starting point, and it's only the Federal Council who can launch the procedure.
I was just thinking while you were speaking and warning a little bit, is that part of your job as well? That sometimes people conceive Economiesuisse almost as the biggest warners of this country. That you always have to be very alert, and you always have to say, "Oh, this isn't working, and this should be done differently." I mean, some people might even say, "Come on, Switzerland is doing well. Why do you always have to find the negative?"
Yeah, I see the argument. But if you look at the situation today, and if you look at the various rankings that are done by various organizations, it is a fact that Switzerland is losing speed. In the Ease of Doing Business report of the World Bank, which is one of the well-established reports that is done on a yearly basis, we're ranking number 38. 38. And we're ranking behind countries such as Rwanda. I have high esteem for Rwanda as a country, but it can't be that Switzerland is so low in this ranking. We've been extremely proud that when it comes to the World Economic Innovation Competitiveness ranking, we were ranked first for 8 years in a row. Now we're number 3 or number 4. So I think we have some, proof that we need to move ahead.
So where do you see the reasons for that? I mean, there are different explanations, of course, but that we lack a little bit in the last years, and that we seem to lose ground compared to other countries. Where's the main reason for that? Where do you see it?
Well, there are different reasons. I think the World Economic Forum has pointed out that, for example, when we were discussing the implementation of the mass immigration initiative, it took us too long. And since it took us so long, that created uncertainty. And you know very well that companies, entrepreneurs do not like uncertainty. We need to, put in place reforms, as I said before. We need always to look at the burden of bureaucracy. The more and more regulations are being put out. Then we are an export-oriented economy, so we need a strong relationship with our main trading partner, which is the European Union.
Said, yeah.
But we need to have access to the worldwide market, so we need to have more free trade agreements. We have, we have the chance that we've already, I guess there are 34 free trade agreements in place. New free trade agreements have been negotiated recently, such as with Indonesia, which is an important market, a big market. But there are still some spots on the world where we could do better. I'm referring to a free trade agreement with Mercosur, with important countries from Latin America. I'm also referring to a free trade agreement with the United States,
which is still in the air and which is being talked about for quite some time already. When I hear you speak, I have the impression, okay, you speak with one voice, the Swiss economy. However, the association is so big. Economiesuisse is speaking for 100,000 companies and for I think almost 2 million employees. Can you even speak with one voice? I mean, I can imagine all your members, they have different opinions, they have different points of views as well. How difficult is that for you to speak for them, knowing that some of them are not aligned with you?
You know, it's indeed a challenge. Before we can speak out and do the lobbying work we do, we have to elaborate a common position amongst our members. And we have a bottom-up approach. We've got 7 permanent thematic committees. We've got over 20 working groups where our members can contribute to the elaboration of our position. And these positions are then, finalized and decided upon by our board of directors, and only then we're going out and present these positions. And most of the time, in more than 90% of the cases, we manage to have our members agree on a common position. And that gives us a lot of strength, because the 100,000 companies we're representing are representing the whole of the Swiss economies, all the sector of the Swiss economy, the industry, as well as the banks and the insurance, the watches, the food industries, all the sectors of the economy that gives the Swiss economy so much strength.
It gives your association a lot of strength as well, and there have been claims in the past already that you're almost more powerful than the government and maybe the parliament as well. Would you agree that there is a power in Economiesuisse that is sometimes hidden and is sometimes maybe not as apparent, but you speak for, as we said, 100,000 companies. You have a lot of power in your hands. Also, as the director, you're a powerful woman.
Well, yes, we have a lot of power, and I think what we want to make sure is that it is known also by the Swiss people, and particularly when they vote, that the huge part of our well-being in this country is due to the strength of our economy. And, it's not easy that starting from such a small country in geographical terms and also in political terms, we're rather a small country, but when it comes to the economy, we are a mid-sized economy. We're ranked number 20 about amongst the biggest economies in the world.
We should be a G20 country.
We should be a G20 country. So we have tried to, convey this message to the various G20 chairmanships. We have not always been heard. But it's the strength that comes from our company that gives us the power, and so I have no power in myself. I'm only transmitting the power of our companies.
However, did you ever feel personally that I'm in a position where it really matters what I say and what I think and what I decide? That, as I said, it is a powerful position. Even if you only transmit what the companies say, you are in a position where you can influence the things that are being done. Does that give you a personal satisfaction, or does that worry you sometimes as well?
Well, it's of course a satisfaction that if you have a position that you have established, elaborated, and that you are defending, if you're successful, it's always a huge pleasure if we manage to convince the Swiss people. Convincing the politician is one side of the thing. The other is to convince
the more difficult one.
The more difficult one is to convince the Swiss people, and we do that 4 times a year, because we've got so many popular initiatives that are related in one way or the other to the economy. So we have this ongoing work, and if we succeed, of course, we are extremely happy, and this is also a huge motivation for my team. We're a small team, we're 70 persons. And we're doing a great job. But from times to times, we do not succeed. We either that the politics decide to go another way, or that the Swiss people decide to go another way. And then we have to accept this situation and deal with this new situation.
How do you deal with it personally? Because as you said yourself, you haven't always been successful. Economiesuisse isn't always on top of things. When you fail with one of your convictions, or with one of the things that you feel are very personal and you want this to happen, and then it doesn't happen, do you feel frustrated, or do you just go on?
Well, I think there is always a sense of frustration or deception, and then I think you have to give yourself some time to accept this frustration. And we have a lot of internal talks with my team, and we are, if we fail, then we look at what were the reasons. Are we, as Economiesuisse, responsible, or are there different reasons for such a failure? And that kind of discussion helps a lot. And then at some point you have to stop to look back and do the analyzing thing, and you have to move forward and say, well, okay, we have to restart again. We will do better next time. And I must say this year, at least over the last 12 months, I think we've been extremely successful.
You have been successful, yeah.
And so I'm very proud and very happy about it.
When you talked before about your upbringing, or let's say your beginnings, they were in diplomacy, and right. You've made a long career also in diplomacy, and then you worked for the state, you worked for the other side, for the political side, so to speak. Does that help you sometimes, that you know how things work in Bern? How long they can take, and being a little bit more diplomatic also in those moments of maybe failure, and if something didn't work the way you wanted it, that you take these almost like the experience from your former professional career and implement it here.
Yeah, I think it's true. First of all, there is a huge network I still have. Many of the people I worked with in the federal administration are still doing their job, maybe in a different job. So I'm in touch with former colleagues. I know how the Federal Council works, what their procedures are, how they address issues, how they can be influenced. I think I have also some experience in terms of international relations, in terms of trade policies. I was responsible at some point for bilateral economic relations worldwide, so I was traveling a lot. I would say I have a good sense of the political and economic systems in the different countries. And I know also from then what the issues are that the Swiss companies want to see addressed in the different markets. So all this together helps me definitely to do my job today. And as you said, I just switched sides. The topics remain the same.
Of course.
And I'm defending now the interests of the Swiss companies.
How about the approach? You can be less diplomatic in your common job. I mean, you can speak your mind, and you can say if something bothers you. As a diplomat, I can imagine you weren't allowed to. Is that almost a relief that you say now I can more freely speak my mind?
It is indeed, and I really had to find out first. You know, it's if you enter into a new function, you have to switch to adapt yourself to this new function, and it took me some time to realize that I was not longer a diplomat and I could speak out when talking to journalists, but also when talking to politicians. And I find it, a relief.
Liberating,
it's liberating, yeah. and it gives me much more room for maneuver. Of course, our members are observing me, are following what I'm doing, and rightly so. So I have not a total freedom, but I have much more room for maneuver than I used to have when I was working for the federal administration.
What you have as well is you're much more a public figure. You're more in the limelight. You have to be outspoken about some things. You've always asked, or you're being asked about a lot of topics. How do you deal with that? Switch from being almost like a hidden person as a diplomat to being someone in the limelight. Was that difficult for you to do that transition?
Not that much, I must say. Actually, most of the time I forget about it. And then I remember when somebody stops me in the street and says, I know you. Mm-hmm. I saw you on TV. You're from Economiesuisse. And then most of the time people say, that was really a good statement. Or they would say, I don't agree with your position, but your speech was good. So in those cases, I remember that I've become more of a public figure than I used to be before.
But do you like it?
Well, yes, in a certain way. Because it does not influence and hamper my personal life. I'm not a politician. I'm not a journalist like you are. So my visibility is kind of a limited one. And so I find it very interesting indeed.
Mm-hmm. Your visibility is maybe a little bit bigger as well because you're the first female director of Economiesuisse. How important is that to you?
Well, I'm extremely proud to be the first female director of Economiesuisse. I was the first female Secretary General of the Federal Department of Education and the Economy. But it's not, it gives me pleasure and gives me pride. But I certainly hope that I was not chosen only because I'm a woman. I think I have, the knowledge and the experience that is needed for the job, and that was the reason why I was chosen.
Does that mean, on the other hand, that you don't really want to be a role model for women in those positions, or that you don't feel the need to be too outspoken about it? And for example, if you take the example of quotas, you've never really been at the forefront of that discussion. Do you want to keep back there a little bit deliberately as well?
Well, I think when it comes to quotas, we're of the opinion that quotas are not the right way to address the issue, to bring more women in politics or in the leadership position of companies. But I certainly want to be a role model, and I have a lot of discussions with young women who are asking me what can I do to promote my career. What should I be doing? Should I go abroad? Should I work for a company? Should I work for the state? What do I do if I want to have children? So in that specific sense towards young women that have their career and their life in front of them, I want to be definitely a role model.
So you do your part there. Final question: when we talk about career, you've done a great career so far. Where do you see it going? Do you see yourself working at Economiesuisse as long as you can? Is there even yet another switch in you that you switch sides maybe once again? You go back to politics. Who knows? You go back to Bern as well. Do you make like a long-term plan for yourself?
I don't actually. For the time being, I'm extremely happy with what I'm doing at Economiesuisse. We've got a great president. I have a great team. I love to work with this team. They're all young people. It's the youngest team I've led. They're motivated. They are engaged. And so I'm really happy with what I'm doing now. And the future will tell us what comes next.
Monika Rühl, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.